I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. Today, we're jumping into another leadership essential, optimism, the power of optimism. Now, optimism doesn't mean you ignore challenges. It doesn't mean that you pretend everything's all right. Far from it. It's about having that mindset that even though you're met with adversity, you retain an empowered mindset, you retain a confidence in your ability and an optimism that you can find solutions in the face of any adversity. When it's done well, you are the emotional thermostat of your team. A leader that can bring optimism to the fore inspires that same trait in those around them. Equally, a leader who is eternally pessimistic will, of course, in turn, see that trait being embodied by the people with which they lead and interact. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why it is so essential. I'm going to try and pull out a couple of people who I believe embody that in the world of business and sport. And then, as ever, I'm going to deliver 10 actionable takeaways that you can implement immediately to ensure you enhance and retain a high level of optimism in your leadership role. I don't think you can underestimate the leadership impact of optimism. Think about environments you've worked in, think about leaders that you have worked with. Those optimistic leaders inspire action, collaboration, a solution-focused approach. When somebody sets that emotional thermostat with optimism, it pulls everybody together, it unites people, and it helps everybody move forward, finding a solution. It's empowering, it's inspiring. Now think of somebody that you've worked with or worked and been led by that brings pessimism. It's just a lens. It's a lens through which you frame the situation in front of you. There's the optimistic lens, there's the pessimistic lens. And the pessimistic lens does everything in reverse. It creates a sense of fear, panic. What does that do? It stops people being solution focused. It stops people being innovative and creative, and it pulls people into a state of procrastination and pontification, and we're no longer taking action to move forward and through the challenges. So it's essential that you enhance your level of optimism and maintain it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that today. Before we dive into the actionable takeaways, let's just put the focus on a couple of leaders that I believe really epitomize optimism. I'll start with Richard Branson, a man that probably needs no introduction to anybody listening to this podcast, but in case you haven't heard of him, he's one of Britain's most famous and impactful entrepreneurs. He has a range of brands under the Virgin Group, from trains to planes, cruise ships, music, wine, gyms, the list goes on and on. And when you read around him and his nature, you get a sense that he has a high level of optimism. He had a phrase that was actually the title of one of his books. I believe it might have been one of his autobiographies, that is, "Screw it, let's do it." I think that captures that sense of belief that whatever we're faced with, let's take action, let's believe we can achieve it. Now, he didn't let those classic narratives, well, just because I've been successful in airlines, does that mean I can be successful in another sector? Just because I was successful in music, does that give me the right to build an airline, etc., etc.? But pessimism didn't come into his thinking. He retained that optimism. He found good people to support him in bringing the vision to light and inspired them with his sense of optimism that Virgin could continue to step into new markets, new sectors, and be equally successful as they had been in other markets and sectors with their other businesses within the Virgin Group. Another leader in the world of the military that I admire is General Colin Powell. The more I read around his leadership style, the more impressed and inspired I am. And he was a big believer in the power of optimism. He used to call optimism a perpetual force multiplier and was very, very passionate and articulate about reinforcing the need to maintain that positive outlook, to look at challenge and adversity through that lens that we alluded to earlier of positivity and optimism in order to find the right solutions to keep moving forward. And if we step into the world of sport, we find an inordinate number of elite high performers that will continually reference the power of optimism. You look at the likes of Michael Jordan in basketball, Serena Williams in tennis. They never lost their belief, irrespective of what challenges they were dealing with, loss of form, injury setbacks. Their optimism didn't waver. Their belief and confidence that they would find a solution and they would overcome that moment of adversity didn't falter. And that is driven by that relentless sense of optimism. And when you start listening to the elite high performers in sport, business, or military, you will start to hear this reference to optimism. You will start to hear them talking more and more about they didn't lose their belief. Even in the darkest moments, they retained a sense that they could get through this challenge, out the other side, and rediscover the form or make the achievements that they aspired to make. I think it's powerful to listen out for that because it reinforces what we're talking about. I think whenever we look at success, there's an old phrase, success leaves clues, and nothing is more appropriate than these leadership essentials that we're talking about within the podcast. When you look at these traits, you start to see them being displayed and discussed in the words and the actions of leaders that you admire and respect. So it's that notion of if it's good enough for them, well, it's good enough for us. What have we got to lose by stepping in and trying to embody what they're talking about in our own words and actions and enhance our leadership toolkit, our leadership DNA, by ensuring they are present in our day-to-day leadership style. So let's move into the takeaways. How do we cultivate optimism? And remember, as with all these leadership essentials, I don't believe they are innate. It's not something you're just born with. We shouldn't have that defeatist mindset of, well, I'm never particularly optimistic. As with all of them, it's something that can be developed with focus. So the first tip is to reframe challenges. Rather than saying, why is this happening to me? Woe is me. I can't believe that I've got another setback or another challenge that I have to deal with. Reframe it and say, what can I learn from this situation? What are the opportunities in this situation? What can I control in this situation? And how am I going to move forward in this situation? I think when you look back on your own life and career, there will undoubtedly be moments where you were faced with a challenge. You could have curled up, retracted from it, stepped back, given up, quit, whatever analogy you want to use, but you didn't. You found the opportunity, you found the way to move forward, and you were stronger as a consequence. You learned invaluable wisdom that's continued to serve you. You went through another door that was a better opportunity for you with the benefit of hindsight. And it's being able to refer and reflect back on those instances, because that gives you the confidence to be able to reframe challenges. Rather than become overwhelmed, you simply could step back and say, hang on, I've been in this situation before. I've been in similar or worse situations and I came out stronger. So let me reframe it and let me look for the opportunity rather than lamenting the fact that I've got more adversity and complaining about the challenge that I now face. Tip number 2, celebrate small wins. Our mindset, our brains, our mind, call it what you will, there's complexity there. We're very good at focusing on negativity, opportunities lost, conversations we didn't have, things we didn't say, things we did say, wish we hadn't said. That dominates our thought process. So we have to rewire the software. We have to celebrate small wins, however small they may be, because it reinforces the fact that you are in control. You are making progress. It might not be lightning quick, but you are moving forward. And the more you can reflect and reinforce and remind yourself of that fact, then the easier it is to retain that sense of optimism that you will continue to move forward and you will overcome this adversity. You will find the strategic solution that's needed and you will get to the point that you aspire to get to. Tip number 3, surround yourself with positivity. Challenge, adversity, stress, it's all around us in our personal and professional lives. At times, you will find it harder to retain optimism than you do at other stages in your life. So lean on some external support. the more positive people you have around you in your social and professional circle, the easier it is to retain that sense of optimism. It's that old adage, monkey see, monkey do. When you're surrounded by people finding a way to retain their optimism, to retain their positivity and keep moving forward, it becomes easier for you to find the drive, the motivation to do the same. Conversely, if you are surrounded by a swell of negative people who have a problem for every solution, then guess what? You're going to end up aping some of that behavior. It's very difficult to stand completely apart from the crowd. So make sure the people that are around you, with the greatest respect, I appreciate that that's not always a simple statement. You can't necessarily cultivate your exact professional ecosystem. There are people you have to work with. It's beyond your control. But I would counter that by saying, then take the ownership of seeking out the most positive people in your professional circle. They don't all have to be in your department. You can interact with people in other aspects of the business. And particularly when we come to our social circle, the time we spend with friends and family, we do have a far greater amount of autonomy in how we curate that group and who we are spending the time with. And there is far less shackles on us that force us to spend time with people who are inherently negative for the majority of the time. Tip number 4, practice gratitude. Now, anybody who works with me, follows me, listens to my content, has listened to previous episodes will know that the notion of gratitude is something that permeates a lot of my training, coaching, and mentoring, because it is scientifically proven that you cannot feel gratitude and at the same time feel fearful, anxious, overwhelmed. And those emotions compromise our ability to create and indeed sustain high performance. So it's imperative that we do everything within our power to address them. And today we're talking about optimism. Well, we don't want to drift into pessimistic, fearful thoughts. That's going to drain away our optimism. And a little bit like point number 2, celebrating small wins, gratitude is about just stepping back, lifting your head up, being aware of what's going on around you, and reinforcing all the things that you have to be grateful for. That could be in your personal network, within your family, within your loved ones, within your friendship group, and indeed it could be around your professional dynamic, and it could just be things in your line of sight, the weather, nature, the opportunity to be outside in nature, walk your dog, whatever it is, there are opportunities to practice gratitude each and every day. But we're not always as disciplined as we should be, and we allow our minds to drift away from the abundance of what we have and focus very much on what we don't have, which moves us out of that optimistic mindset and starts pushing us back into that fearful and pessimistic mindset. So I encourage you to find that gratitude practice. And one of the most powerful tips that I share with everybody is at the start of every day, think of 3 things you're grateful for from the previous day. Write them down. It's a massively enhancing boost to your mindset. And for those of you that say, I don't have time, I haven't got time to add another task to my manic daily routine, I have the perfect counter. And forgive me if you heard me say this before, but do it while you're brushing your teeth, because I sincerely hope that everybody listening still has time to brush their teeth. So rather than letting your mind wander, as you engage in that daily habit, think about 3 things from the previous day that you are grateful for. And I guarantee you will have a much more optimistic mindset as you step into the challenges of the day. Tip number 5, visualize success. I spend a lot of time with clients, helping and supporting them develop the ability to visualize. It is an X factor in high performance that you will struggle to find elite performers in sectors such as the sporting world and military that don't engage in visualization. Now, you don't need to be an expert in the process. It's something that I can help you with if that was of interest. But the fundamental principle is opening your mind to think about the positive outcomes you wish to achieve. However challenging the moment that you are in, you have to retain the belief that you can move forward. And one of the ways that you can help your mind engage and support you with the right optimistic mindset is to see yourself achieving those positive outcomes, to take a moment of calm and reflect and say, this is where I want to be. I see myself getting there. I see myself celebrating that achievement, phoning my wife, phoning my husband, and celebrating the fact that we reached that particular milestone. I won't bog you down with the science, but there is something very, very powerful about having absolute clarity on what you're trying to achieve and seeing yourself physically and emotionally achieving that. Tip number 6, control your inputs. Now, this ties in a little bit around being around positive people, but I'm going to move away from people. I'm going to talk about two things here: the news and social media. Let's start with the news. I think we all recognize that bad news sells. I've talked about it in a number of episodes. I won't go too deep into it now, but you will struggle to put the news on and find uplifting, positive stories that will inspire and energize you for the day. Invariably, what you will find is things that frighten you, make you nervous, raise your level of anxiety. So it's very, very difficult to allow yourself this constant drip feed of news consumption via the TV, via the radio, via text alerts, via newspapers, digital media, alerts on your phone, bulletins in the car when you're driving between meetings. When you think about how often you expose yourself to the news, then it's a bit like creating a slow puncture. Your level of optimism is draining away because you're constantly putting your mind into a fearful and pessimistic state. Now, equally, social media, if it serves you, if you go on social media and you come off it energized, pumped up, ready to take on the world, to tackle your to-do list and to be the best version of you, then keep doing it. But in my experience, the majority of people come off the platforms and they feel a bit blah. They've engaged in the thief of joy, comparison. They're looking at a disproportionate representation of people's lives, comparing it against their own and putting themselves into a funk. So it's like having two slow punches, in my opinion. If you are regularly engaging in doom scrolling on social media, comparing yourself with what is a poor reflection of other people's lives, because people only put the top 3% of their existence on social media. They don't put all the problems and challenges they're wrestling with. So you're not looking through a balanced lens there. If you're looking at that whilst also being exposed to a daily onslaught of negative news media, you really do put yourself on the back foot to have any level of optimism. So I challenge you to say, what's it worth to you to bring the best version of you to work, to your personal relationships, to your professional relationships? You need energy. You need optimism. Fix those slow punches. I'm not saying you have to go cold turkey, but certainly restrict your exposure. Do you need to listen to the news continually? Could you drive to work listening to a podcast? Could you drive to work listening to your favorite musical playlist? Would you be in a far better headspace when you arrive than having listened to the fourth iteration of the news that you've already heard in your kitchen, on the television, whilst eating your breakfast, and also then on your commute to work? Tip number 7, embrace failure as a mechanism for growth. I talked about this at the top of the episode, that it's important to be able to reflect back on moments of challenge in our lives. And it's an essential step. That's why it's one of the key takeaways we're talking about here, because none of us go through life on a perfectly seamless upward trajectory in our relationships, in our personal life, in our health, in our professional roles. We all hit bumps in the road. And at those stressful junctions, we make decisions, we take action, we find solutions, or sometimes we go backwards before we come forwards. But all of it gives us a sense of wisdom and insight and experience. And we must draw on that and reflect on all the times that what seemed insurmountable actually didn't kill us. We moved through it and we emerged stronger as a consequence and wiser. So we must recognize that we're not looking, I'm not one of these people that says, oh, fail, 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 fail. We're not aspiring to fail, but what we are doing is ensuring we do not fear failure. We're not going to sit in a world of regret because we spent all our time procrastinating and pontificating and not taking action to reduce the likelihood of failure. I think we've got to dare greatly. We've got to be bold. We've got to move forward. And sometimes you will fail. You learn from those mistakes. You don't repeat them twice. And you keep moving forward. You are stronger as a consequence. So don't be frightened to go back to some of those painful chapters to remind you that actually I came out stronger, because when you remind yourself of that fact, it is much easier to retain your sense of optimism. Tip number 8, lead by example. Leadership's hard. Things are coming at you on a daily basis, decisions, challenges, people problems, customer problems, stakeholder problems. They are all on your to-do list, and the to-do list doesn't get any shorter. So you want to get the very best out of the people you lead. The more they can do, the more they can execute, the more energy and innovation they bring to their role, the easier it is for you to lead. The old adage of a rising tide lifts all boats. So therefore, you need to be cognizant of everything you do in terms of your words and your actions, and how that either brings out the best in your team or suppresses their ability. And optimism is one of those elixirs. As we've said in the opening of the episode, when your people look at you and see you relentlessly optimistic, irrespective of what we are facing as an organization, as a department, as a team, they will be inspired to take action. And the only way through a problem is through action. If we get stuck in procrastination, there is no progress, there is no momentum, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Things will get worse. That fuels people's sense of pessimism and fear, and we just spiral down. So challenge yourself to bring the optimism, not just for you and your mindset, but to ensure you have emboldened your team to move forward and take action with you. Tip number 9, seek out optimistic role models. Now, we talked earlier about curating positivity in the people that you socialize with and that you work with. As you've heard me say a number of times, I'm a big believer in the power of mentorship and seeking out people in your professional organization, or indeed outside of it, that you can learn from. Yes, elements of that is skill-based and honing and enhancing your skills, but also in terms of these leadership essentials, if you see somebody that really embodies a trait that you admire, like optimism, get close to them. Ask them about it. Don't be frightened to ask the obvious question. Tell them you admire this trait in them, and what have they done to enhance it and to retain it. You will be given some little gems of wisdom that you can download and incorporate into your own leadership DNA. So think about the most optimistic leaders that you've seen and make it a challenge to yourself that you're going to reach out and put something in the diary to go and have a coffee with them or a virtual meeting with them to explore and learn from them. And last but not least, tip number 10, focus on solutions rather than problems. Drop the mic, James. What an obvious statement. I appreciate it's easy to be cynical and to roll your eyes, but I embed in a lot of leadership groups. I observe meetings, and then I support teams to build high-performing habits and high-performing environments. And one of the areas that many, many teams stumble is they get bogged down in articulating, re-articulating, and re-articulating again the problem. And everybody gets into that mindset of, oh, it's challenging. Yes, it's terrible, isn't it? We haven't got the resource. We haven't got this. We haven't got that. It takes a strong leader to reset and say, okay, good. We know what the problem is. Now we need to get into the key question of what are we going to do about it? What is the solution? What can we control? What are we going to do to punch through this challenge? And that stewardship of a meeting particularly is essential to pull people into that optimistic mindset, tying back into role modeling the right behaviors, tying back into the reflection piece. A leader can do all of it in a very quick set of words to remind them that we've overcome challenges in the past, to remind your team that this will be no different, that you have belief in them to find solutions. But the key thing is to talk about those solutions, to focus on what we can control. So that, I think, is essential. We can't spend too much time. Yes, of course, we've got to identify the problem, but there comes a point when we have to say, we know what it is. Let's stop talking it up and driving everybody's energy into the floor and move into what are we going to do about it. So I hope you found this latest Leadership Essential piece helpful. Remember, you are the emotional thermostat of your team. I always want you reflecting as you listen to these episodes and thinking, what am I bringing? What am I bringing in my leadership style, in my personal life, in my professional role? What energy am I bringing to my interactions? Am I bringing optimism? Am I helping people take action, be inspired to move forward? Or am I drifting into that pessimism, which will naturally have the reverse effect? Now, nobody's perfect. We're not going to be locked in, epitomizing each and every one of these leadership essentials that we feature on the podcast each and every day. But step 1 is to be aware of it. Step 2 is to reflect regularly. It's important to sort of deconstruct your week I think it's a healthy thing to do every weekend. What went well this week? What didn't go well? Where did I stumble a bit? What do I want to refocus on and ensure that I'm better at in the coming week? And this is a classic area. Bring the optimism, bring the energy, inspire your team to move through and past each and every challenge. I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.